Senator Meredith's lawyer, Selwyn Pieters, joins me now from Toronto. Sir, your client has alleged that the criticism he's received has been racially motivated. What evidence does he have for that, and why does he believe that?
Senator Meredith is looking contextually at the way he was treated for the past 6 years as a senator and the double standards that are being applied here. There's any number of senators who not only are alleged but have misconducted themselves. There's at least one senator who was criminally convicted who sits as a senator. There's another senator who was engaged in offshore banking fraud. There's a senator who was engaged in alleged sexual improprieties who is sitting in the Senate, and they're the senators from the financial disclosure scandal. And so there's any number.
But can you name who some of these senators are?
There's any number of senators. There's Duffy, Wallen, Kenney, and I can go down the line of senators who have been engaged in improper conduct that one could say, well, you know, resign or be expelled, and that hasn't happened.
Who is the senator who you were discussing who is alleged to have had sexual misconduct?
Well, there's a senator who was there was a senator who was in a magazine naked, and in another magazine with a stripper naked as well, with just his bathrobe, and so, you know, that if you go to Frank magazine, you'll see those, you'll see them.
So I guess what I'm trying to understand, are you equating what your client did with, say, what Senator Duffy was alleged to have done, or these other senators who you're describing but not naming?
Yes. Senator Meredith was engaged in a consensual relationship with a 17-year-old teenager, 18-year-old teenager who was above the age of consent, right?
But the police didn't say they couldn't move forward, not because they weren't looking at anything or because they had cleared him, but because the victim in this case did not want to make a statement and was afraid of her identity being publicly exposed.
Well, you know, if she had given the police evidence and reasonable and proper grounds to arrest Senator Meredith and charge him, certainly they would have done that. That would have been their discretion. You know, the fact that we're hearing, oh, well, she didn't want it to be publicly disclosed, like that's a red herring to me. Nothing improper happened. Then she has disclosed a whole chain of correspondence. She's kept all the narrative, and nothing in the narrative that she has disclosed suggests anything improper took place.
So you think that if a senator of another color had done this, they would not be facing the same kind of criticism that your client is?
And scrutiny, because they're portraying him as a sexual predator, and historically that is how people look at black men, as hypersexual, as sexual predators, as thinking with their penis as opposed to their heads, and so on and so forth. So I mean, Senator Meredith falls within a whole line of people who stereotype black men a certain way. Oh, because he had a relationship with someone who is a teenager above the age of consent, and because he's an older man and he's married and he's a pastor, then you know, the sword of Damocles should fall on him.
But he was a man in a position of considerable power, and she was a teenage girl. What about protecting young women who are visible minorities from men in powerful positions who exploit that? He
didn't exploit anything. It was a consensual sexual relationship. A teenager or a person who is a person who is able to consent is able to have sexual relationships. I mean, in some cultures, people marry at 12. You have very old men marrying people at 12. So I don't buy this thing about power and about protecting and all that sort of stuff. If it's a consensual relationship between adults or people over the age of consent, I see no problem with it as long as there's no exploitation.
I'm trying to understand, though, the allegations against your client are that he was involved with a teenage girl. Where is the racially motivated part of that allegation when he's admitted that he did that?
The fact of the matter is the Senate cannot have a double standard for the treatment of its members. And what I'm saying is that historically, and Meredith case is just one more that added to the context, black people in public places and in highly visible public jobs are invariably taken down, whether it's by their own measures or by counterfeits or other methods, when some indiscretion or some moral issue takes place, when that doesn't happen in the wider society to other people.
The issue in your client's particular case is that he was in a role of power as a pastor, as a senator, and he used that in text messages that were provided to the Senate ethics officer in part to convince, and it appears at times, to coerce this young woman.
No, that's not true. I mean, the discussion that took place from what I read is that she wanted an internship position and she asked him to write a reference letter. And they're saying because he wrote that reference letter, he was abusing his power. If he wrote a reference letter for her, then he provided her with an advantage. And that advantage is not because of sex. He would have already known her for some time when he wrote that letter.
Do you think that your client's behavior is acceptable?
It is not my position to make a moral judgment on my client's conduct. Some people have condemned the behavior. Some people are supportive. And so, you know, I will leave that to his God to judge him.
Are you concerned that your client could face child pornography charges because of the explicit nature of some of the messages that he exchanged with the victim?
No, I don't foresee him facing any charges of that nature. He didn't, remember, regardless of the explicit nature of the chats, he didn't disclose those chats to anyone, and those chats weren't found on him. It's the woman who disclosed those chats. And there's nothing in those chats that would amount to child pornography.
There are Canadians who are watching this and saying this is a reflection on the Senate. It's a very bad reflection on the Senate, and they're saying he should not be allowed to sit as a senator. Do you think his behavior is becoming of a senator?
His behavior is completely becoming of a senator. This was not something that was done in public. This was conduct between two consenting persons. One person decided to, for whatever reason, I don't know what the reasons are, but one person decided to disclose it to the media, to the Toronto Star, and I don't know whether that was in a bid to extort him or what it was, but it was disclosed to the Toronto Star, and then the Senate decided they were going to investigate it. But outside of that, this was not something where he was doing something in the bushes or he was doing something on the street. It was in the privacy of his room and her room.
Does doing it in private make it okay when you're talking about a young woman who he met at church when she was 15 years old?
He met her when she was 16, and let's stay on that because you're trying now to dumb the age down to make it look like his relation started with her when she was 16. It takes two to tango, or tangos, you know, and so the fact remains is that this was a consensual relationship between two people who can consent, and regardless of how it's twisted and turned, regardless of the noise that's been made, he has apologized for his moral failing, and ask for forgiveness and reconciliation, and that should be the end of the matter. Full stop.
Selwyn Pieters, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.